the next part is maybe the most controversial part of this video, and hopefully I don't get canceled for this. So I'm not going to put you guys on the spot because I know you two like to remain relatively neutral, but I would like to announce my formal endorsement for what it's worth of Donald Trump for the 2024 US presidential elections. And like Bill Ackman was saying, uh, it seems like a fringe thing for me to say. And I know a lot of like quite a few audience members probably just turned the video off right here and now. And if you're still here, thank you so much. But just hear me out, okay? So like just promise to hear me out for the first 5 minutes, and if you think that I'm spewing BS, you can turn off the video. But um, here's my perspective, right? We've talked over and over again about the issues that America is facing right now. And by the way, like my endorsement actually means nothing because I'm not an American citizen and I don't hold American. I don't have an American passport. I'm not eligible for this election. I'm Canadian, so my endorsement doesn't actually mean anything. So before you get mad at me, like just know like it doesn't actually matter. I can't vote in this election. But just as like a bystander from Canada, I'm endorsing Trump because I think that like it's kind of like a similar situation to here in Canada, where like the current leadership of the government is leading the people down like a very dangerous path. So in America, the big problems like David Sachs was raising, the borders in crisis, the Democrats are lying to the people about Biden's mental condition. They're being incredibly irresponsible and undemocratic by doing so. And the Biden's administration is run by this like shadow government. So like, and even if Biden is replaced, it's not much better because, in my opinion, they've already lost the confidence of the people, or they should lose the confidence of the people for doing this, right? And all this like issues with the wars that are breaking out and the Biden's handling of them, I think these are extremely valid, and I believe that Trump will do a better job in handling those. So that's kind of my main point. And before you cancel me as an alt right, the next Alex Jones, let me just say this. So back in 2019, if I were to say to you, hey, electric vehicles were going to take over the world, and everyone's going to want to buy an electric vehicle one day. And eventually, all cars will not only be electric, but they will be driverless, right? They'll be autonomous. You would say that that's an insane idea, right? And if I were to tell you, hey, like I still believe in this idea, I'm going to buy Tesla stock because Tesla is the leader in this field, and I'm going to buy a lot of it because I think that they're going to win in this space, and people are going to get converted over. When back in 2019, like 90% of people drove gas cars, or maybe even more than 90%. And then what happened a couple years later, right? Tesla stock skyrocketed and their sales skyrocketed too. So maybe that fringe opinion wasn't so fringe. Maybe I was just early, right? And this is exactly what happened. Although back then I was a student, so I didn't get super rich off of it. So because I didn't have that much money to invest in it in the first place. But anyways, different story. So back in 2020, I've heard of Bitcoin before, but that was kind of the first time that I thought that it could genuinely be a real thing, right? So before 2020, I thought Bitcoin was a fringe idea. You're telling me that I should put real money into this magic internet money that nerds use. That's like, that nerds use to buy drugs and guns and whatnot, right? Like that was a crazy idea. If I told you before 2020, or even some people think this way now, right? If I told you that I'm going to dump a sizable percentage of my net worth into Bitcoin, a lot of people would think that that's a fringe idea. That's absolutely insane. You're absolutely insane for even thinking or suggesting that. But look at what happened with Bitcoin between 2020 till now, right? And I still believe that a lot of people are not really seeing the light, and they're going to see the light very soon when Bitcoin makes this bull run. But I guess we'll have to see about that, whether it can break 100K. But anyways, this is kind of my point, is that what you think of like as a fringe opinion might not be a fringe opinion. I might just be early, right? A lot of with Bitcoin, with Tesla, I think I was right in the end. But when I first suggested this idea, a lot of people said it was crazy, but I wasn't crazy. I was early. So now I'm saying that Trump is endorsing Trump is kind of like a similar idea where, we've seen like Trump's past and we've seen how he behaves, and like endorsing Trump means like you're, one of those redneck hillbillies that are like firing guns into the air. This is kind of the idea of a Trump supporter that everyone has, right? But as we've seen, even in 2016, a lot of people voted for Trump. So if 40% of people voted for Trump, maybe his ideas wasn't so radical to begin with. If like 40% of the country vehemently believes in like what he's saying, right? So that's number one. And number two, I think that there is a significant difference between the 2016 Trump and 2024 Trump, where he's mellowed a lot, and he's kind of his ideas are kind of becoming more moderate and more mainstream. And in contrast, I think what we've seen, a lot of the stuff that Biden has done has been radical, i.e., letting like open borders, letting like crime, like not punishing crime in all these like democratic states and cities. And granted, it's not just Biden; it's the Democratic Party in general. I know a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, like punishing crime, that's mostly a state thing," but whatever, right? Um, so yeah, I think that that's kind of the point that I was trying to make, that I'm willing to adapt to the new reality when the facts change. And if you would listen, in my opinion, I think that the facts are changing, and I keep an open mind, and I'm willing to change my mind. And I think that, like, one last point on this, I think that 80 to 90% of people in this world tend to not like to change their opinion, right? They get cemented in one way of thinking that, like, because some people went to school for like 10 years in finance and be like, hey, you got to have an 80-20 portfolio or a 60-40 portfolio, right? You got to have a certain exposure to bonds. You got to have a certain exposure to like ETFs and whatnot, right? And Bitcoin kind of flies in the face of that. It's like, is your theory that you spent 10 years at school for is completely wrong, and that rubs people the wrong way. And I think that to be like successful, I owe a lot of the successes in my life, in my opinion, to being able to rapidly change my mind when the facts change, and keeping an open mind on new ideas. And I think that this is an example. So yeah, I've spoken a lot. I want to give you guys like a chance to respond. Do you guys think I'm crazy? Do you guys think I'm alt right? Or do you guys think that I have some legitimate points? I'm happy to hear what you guys have to say in response.
I think you're just doing what's best for like your own or like societal like circumstances. I feel like using like facts on historical like events, etc. You've deducted that, oh, okay, this is the circumstances from before and these are the facts, and I think it would be much better if we like, change that whole story or circumstances, and that's totally fair. I think you have like valid points, facts. So people are entitled to opinionate on like what they want to opinionate about. So respectful or respectable. So no problem.
It's a bold choice to announce a legitimate endorsement. I think from my perspective, there is insufficient. I have consumed insufficient content and have insufficient confidence to be endorsing anyone at this day at this point. Um, and that goes for the Republicans or the Democrats, especially given the fact that I don't really have a horse in this race, given that it's America and I live in Canada. At the end of the day, yes, it affects me, but I don't. I basically am only affected by the stock market in the States and any trickle through that comes to Canada. So at the end of the day, it's a lot less of a major decision for my for me and my lifestyle and expectations. So it's just it's not I don't think I'll be endorsing. I think anyone, and I think I think that it makes sense the reasons why you are endorsing Trump for from your perspective. Um, I can see reasons why someone would endorse. Um, I find it hard to see reasons to endorse Biden himself, but I can understand why people would endorse the Democrats as a party, right? But I think that I will be opting out, and I mean you do what you want to do, my guy.
Just to clarify, obviously I'm Canadian too, and I also don't actually have a horse in this race, but I felt the need to like, and maybe a lot of people are criticizing me down in the comments for that right now. Be like, hey, like, why are you commenting on the American election when you're not even an American? Fine, valid criticism. I totally get it, but it, from my perspective, I'm kind of just doing this out of a concern for society as a whole. Call it concern for Western society, right? Which lumps in, you know, like Western Europe, Canada, US, maybe even Australia too. So call it concern for just like the West in general, right? Because, you know, here in the West, we have a certain set of beliefs like democracy and, you know, freedom and all this stuff. So I think that a lot of the stuff that has been happening, the incessant wars, the uncontrolled border on the south of the United States, you know, all this like, you know, shadow government running the White House and all this stuff. Like this is incredibly unhealthy, and I think I just think Trump will be the one to put a stop to all of this. So this is kind of like the fundamental reason that I keep coming back to. And second of all, um, I just think that if you actually look into Trump's kind of leadership of the Republican Party, you can see that maybe you would disagree with me on this, Tristan, but like I feel that the Republican Party under Trump is actually shifting left socially. And here's the evidence that I have to back it up, right? So here's an article from the Associated Press, which, by the way, is a left leaning article. So usually they don't have anything nice to say about Trump. But the headline is Republicans move at Trump's behest to change how they will oppose abortion. So you know that you know the Republican Party is pro-life in general, right? So we can't really expect them to be pro-choice, even if they get a like a super moderate. But look at what Trump has done, right? So under Trump's leadership of the Republican Party for this year, at least, they're omitting the explicit basis for a national ban on abortion for the first time in 40 years. So for the first time in 40 years, the like Republican Party national platform does not include wording that says that they want a national ban on abortion. Now, I know where you're going to say it's like, you know, that's not good enough because, you know, they reverse Roe v. Wade, and then the states get to decide, and then the red states will be able to ban abortion in the whole state if they want to. Like, I get that criticism, right? But my response to that is that, you know, number one, I'm actually in agreement with the Democrats on this one, where I think that people like women should have access to abortion, and I'm pro-choice myself. But I think that there's more than one issue at hand than abortion, first of all, right? Abortion is only one of the major issues that we're facing. And number two, I think passing it to the states could be a solution as well, right? Under the circumstances, right? Because if you know anything about the United States Constitution, it separates there's like very clear delineations of power where, you know, what is a federal responsibility, what's a state responsibility. So it's kind of the system as a whole that's produced this kind of system where the states have a lot of power, more power than usual. So maybe that's one part that us from Canada Canadians might not fully understand. So I think that this is like kind of the most left leaning that you're going to get out of the Republican Party, where they're not saying that they're pro choice, obviously, but they're also not saying that they're going to have a national ban. And again, this is the first time in 40 years. that they've excluded language for a national ban on abortion. So I think that the Republican Party under Trump is actually like becoming more moderate. And you know, if you remember back in 2016, his Trump's vice president Mike Pence, he was a very religious guy, right? Super pro-life, super religious, and a big concern on why people didn't want to vote for Trump is that Mike Pence is going to bring all this like religious kind of stuff into like the pro-life stuff into America, into the presidency or the vice presidency in his case. So, yeah, this time, Mike Pence is not the running mate. And from what I've read about JD Vance, he's more moderate. So, he's from Ohio, by the way, which is kind of a Trump leaning state now, but traditionally it has been a swing state. So, just the fact that he's from a swing state means that, you got to appeal to people from both sides somewhat versus Mike Pence, who's from Indiana, who's a heavily, heavily like deep red state, right? So my point is that I think that Trump is moving the Republican Party left socially. I mean, they're still right. They're still a right wing party, obviously, but I think that you could have gotten someone much worse than Trump from the social conservative side. I don't know if you agree with that statement. Tristan, your thoughts?
Like, I think that his running mate, for instance, is definitely more not hardline red the way that Pence was, but and I think that's maybe a significant difference. But I think also part of that is because I don't think he needs to convince the Republican folks to vote for him with by having a hardline red guy with him this time, whereas last time he kind of needed Pence on that front. So I'm not sure necessarily if he's moving it left or not. It's difficult to say. Obviously, they may move left on some issues, but right on others. It's not a clear cut line in the sand. I think for all of these issues and for the overall left right leaning of the party.
No, this time no more. Sorry.
Pass on that one. Okay, so I guess I'll share my response to that. So my whole point was that on the issues that are my major concerns, where the Republican parties are too right leaning for me, i.e., the like ban on abortion thing, they move left on that. And on the other issues where I think that like the left needs to be reined in a bit, like all the stuff that I said about like wokeism and all the stuff that I said about like open borders, like on the basis of like humanitarian issues, the Republican Party is trying to move us to the right of that, which I think is what's needed to help fix the issue, right? So the Republican Party, to me, is becoming more and more attractive because they're moving left on the correct issues and moving right on the correct issues as well. Versus where I think that the Democratic Party is just kind of moving left in general as a whole on like every single issue. And then on some issues, they've moved too far to the left. And that's become less appealing to me. And this is why like I went as far as endorsing Trump for this, because I think that that's like really what's needed. His like kind of more balanced approach, as crazy as that sounds when I say Trump is like more balanced, but it appears that the evidence is telling me that this is the case. Tristan, what do you have to say to that? I know you have some response.
I understand your argument. I don't know if I would necessarily agree on every aspect of it, but I'd have to think about it more to really nail down where I would agree and where I would disagree on that front, since there's I think in a lot of respects the Republican Party tends to still be fairly right on a lot of issues, and maybe the ones that are priority to you, they're moving in the right direction, but I think there are issues in other areas where they're still, even if they aren't moving right or left, they're still too far in the right camp for me for other areas. But I'd have to really nail it down on where and what those policies are before I go too hard on them. And I think the same thing can be said for the Democrats, where there's definitely some areas where they're spending a lot of time on things that I don't think are super important, and spending a lot of time and effort, and yet being negligent on other areas that I think are of importance. So it's difficult to say.
I've said in the past, and I actually still stand by this, despite my endorsement of Trump, is that I don't believe that Trump is the best candidate that America has to offer, right? Like, obviously, you're never going to find a candidate that's 100% in agreement with you. And obviously, I don't agree with Trump on 100% of what he says. But I think if we were to go down this path of a two-party system, which you can argue against it and you can say how stupid it is all you want, but this is the system that is in place. And if you vote for anyone else, they're not going to win and your vote is not going to matter. Right. So between the two, I think that Trump has become acceptable enough for me to like support him. And Biden has moved so far to the left and implemented all these bad policies, in my opinion, that he's and also not to mention the cognitive decline, that he's basically unelectable. So this is the point, right? Like between Trump and Biden, like Biden is completely unacceptable and Trump is acceptable enough to consider. And this is the point that I'm trying to make, right? And if I could pick anyone to be president, I would not pick either Trump or Biden. And I think that is a sentiment that is shared by most people, right? So yeah, last thing that I wanted to say to this is, again, I know that tonight has made me sound like a alt-right fringe conspiracy theorist, but let me just show you one final piece of data that might go against that, right? So this is a poll that is done by Jesse, who's goes by Micro to Macro. He's a YouTuber in the finance realm. So he ran this poll that got over 1,300 votes that so far, right? The vote is running for 6 days, but so far, 1,300 people voted, and he basically asked, like, who would you vote for, right? Just plain and simple. Trump, Biden, RFK Jr., or don't care, or don't know. And look at the margins, right? Like 69% of people voted for Trump in this poll. And Biden actually came less than RFK, who's like, a third party candidate who's like been kicked out of the Democratic Party, who's not polling that well overall. I mean, he's polling well for a third party candidate, but nowhere near enough to even stand a remote chance of winning. So, the fact that Biden got less votes than RFK, and like look at the proportion of people who voted for Trump. So I want to push back against this idea that supporting Trump is this fringe idea that your like weird racist uncle is that only your weird racist uncle is supportive of. It's not, right. And this is exemplified by another comment with this random guy who commented on Jesse's poll that says, as a fourth generation New Yorker who voted against Trump twice, I will be voting for Trump in 2024 this time around, because the toxic byproduct of the woke DEI, defund the police, pro-Hamas garbage that I witnessed in my city has to change. The AG, or Attorney General, and the Manhattan DA have to go, and Trump will lean into this. So this is, again, one person's opinion. I don't live in New York, so I don't know enough about exactly what's going on to really comment on this. I don't think you guys have that much to comment on this either, but I'm trying to illustrate just one person's opinion, right? This is just, I'm sure this sentiment is shared by a lot of people. And New York is a very deep blue state, right? Like Democratic, supportive state.